Welcome to Everyday Christianity. I'm your host, Greg Malone. You can contact me by looking at my website, www.malonegreg.com, or you can give me a call on my phone at 315-744-0007 and leave a text message or leave a message on my phone, and I will get right back to you. We're continuing to exposit throughout the Bible, and we are in Genesis chapter 41, starting at verse 50. So please read along with me today as we exposit through the scriptures. Before the years of famine came, two sons were born to Joseph by Asenath, daughter of Pharoah, priest of On. Joseph named his firstborn Manasseh, and said, "It is because God has made me forget all my trouble and all my father's household." The second son he named Ephraim, and said, "It is because God has made me fruitful in the land of my suffering." Now notice two of the most traumatic events in Joseph's life. The sons he felt made up for those events. One is the trouble in his father's household, and the next is the fruitfulness in the land of his suffering. Even though he's second in command, he's still calling it his land of his suffering. So it's interesting the words that he used to name his children to be a remembrance of these things. Verse 53, "The 7 years of abundance in Egypt came to an end, and the 7 years of famine began, just as Joseph had said. There was famine in all the other lands, but in the whole land of Egypt there was food. When all Egypt began to feel the famine, the people cried to Pharaoh for food. Then Pharaoh told all the Egyptians, 'Go to Joseph and do what he tells you to,' or do what he tells you." Verse 56, "When the famine had spread over the whole country, Joseph opened all the storehouses and sold grain to the Egyptians, for the famine was severe throughout Egypt." Verse 57, "And all the world came to Egypt to buy grain from Joseph, because the famine was so severe everywhere." So we see that the prophecy is being fulfilled. Obviously, it is affecting the whole world, at least in that area, and they're all coming to realize that, hey, we're running out of food. Especially the Egyptians, when they ran out of food, they said, wait, this is terrible. They went to Pharaoh, and he told them, go to Joseph. That's who he had set up to take care of this problem. And so he went ahead and began the program which he had produced, which was for the Egyptians to buy from the storehouses now of Pharaoh, who had all this grain stored up. And remember, it was so much for number that they couldn't even number. It was like the sands of the sea. Chapter 42. When Jacob learned that there was grain in Egypt, he said to his sons, "Why do you just keep looking at each other?" He continued, "I have heard that there is grain in Egypt. Go down there and buy some for us, so that we may live and not die." Now, obviously, Jacob was experiencing severe famine. If he was sending them down to Egypt, I'm sure because of this famine, he had to probably pretty much clean out all of his livestock. He probably had plenty of money from doing so, because it would have been sold for food during this famine. But obviously, he didn't have anywhere to graze his cattle. So they were herders, and the sons didn't have anything to do, so they're all sitting around. And Jacob says, "Why do you just keep looking at each other? I have heard there's grain in Egypt. Go down there and buy some for us, so that we may live and not die." So anyway, he puts a plan of attack into effect and sends the brothers down to Egypt. Then 10 of Joseph's brothers went down to buy grain from Egypt. But Jacob did not send Benjamin, Joseph's brothers, with the other, because he was afraid that harm might come to him. And you know why he was afraid that harm might come to him, because it came to his son, Joseph, who was, attacked basically and sold into slavery. In fact, they planned to murder him, but he was saved from that, and they sold him for 20 pieces of silver. So he didn't send Benjamin with him. So Israel's sons were among those who went to buy grain, for there was famine in the land of Canaan also. Now Joseph was the governor of the land, the person who sold grain to all its people. So when Joseph's brothers arrived, they bowed down to him with their faces to the ground. As soon as Joseph saw his brothers, he recognized them. But he pretended to be a stranger and spoke harshly to them. "Where do you come from?" he asked. "From the land of Canaan," they replied, "to buy food." Verse 8. Although Joseph recognized his brothers, they did not recognize him. Then he remembered his dreams about them and said to them, "You are spies. You have come to see where our land is unprotected." Verse 10. "No, my lord," they answered. "Your servants have come to buy food. We are all the sons of one man. Your servants are honest men and not spies." Well, I think they were gilding the lily a bit, saying that they were honest men and not spies. I believe they weren't spies, but obviously we saw them lie to their father directly to his face and tell them basically that his brother Joseph was killed, and then they kept it silent even after their father almost died of grief over his son. Verse 12. "No," he said that to them, "you have come to see where our land is unprotected." And he went into "Your servants are 12 brothers, son of one man." Then verse 14. "Joseph said to them, 'It is just as I told you, you are spies, and this is how you will be tested. As surely as Pharaoh lives, you will not leave this place unless your youngest brother comes here. Send one of your number to get your brother. The rest of you will be kept in prison, so that your words may be tested to see if you are telling the truth. If you are not, then as surely as Pharaoh lives, you are spies.' And he put them all in custody for 3 days." Now, I suppose this, I don't know this for a fact, but I suppose what was going on in Joseph's head was that he wanted to see his brother and his father again and have the whole family reunited. But he was kind of toying with the brothers here and kind of making them suffer a little bit and causing them much fear and consternation. So I think maybe his motives weren't completely pure here with it as regard to doing the will of the Lord. I think he had these dreams back in the back of his mind, knowing that he said the sun, moon, and stars would bow down to him, meaning his father and his mother and the other children or his brothers would bow down to them. So anyway, he puts them into custody for 3 days. On the 3rd day, Joseph said to them, "Do this and you will live, for I fear God. If you are honest men, let one of your brothers stay here in prison, while the rest of you go and take grain back to your starving households. But you must bring your youngest brother to me, so that your words may be verified and that you may not die." This they proceeded to do. Then said they one to another, "Surely we are being punished because of our brother. We saw how distressed he is when he pleaded with us for his life, but we would not listen. That is why this distress has come upon them." Now note that they link this distress they're in now with what went on with their brother. I don't know if they lived relative lives of ease from the time when they pretended that their brother was killed and sold them in slavery. And here Reuben replies, "Didn't I tell you not to sin against the boy? But you wouldn't listen. Now you must give an account for his blood." They did not realize that Joseph could understand them, since he was using an interpreter. he turned away from them and began to weep, but then came back and spoke to them again. He had Simeon taken from them and bound before their eyes. Joseph gave orders to fill their bags with grain, and to put each man's silver back in his sack, and to give them provisions for their journey. After this was done for them, they loaded their grain on their donkeys and left. I'm not quite sure why Joseph chose Simeon to be held, but anyway, he wanted to take one of the brothers to keep them as a surety that they would return with their younger brother. And so he sends them back. He secretly puts their money back in their sack and loaded grain on the donkeys, and they left. At the place where they stopped for the night, one of them opened his sack to get feed for his donkey and he saw his silver in the mouth of the sack. "My silver has been returned," he said to his brothers. Here it is in my sack." Their hearts sank as they turned to each other, trembling, and said, "What is this that God has done to us?" Now we're going to end right there in this our reading in this section here, but they're equating what is happening to them with something God is doing to them, and quite rightly so. At least they had this discernment to tell what was happening to them was not of any real man's doing, but as a retribution of God for their treatment of their brother Joseph and selling him into slavery and tricking their father and making him suppose that his son was dead. So, we get into twisted situations in our lives. I know personally of people, including my life, that we've just got ourselves into some ridiculous circumstances because we were deceitful or acting, in an evil way towards our relatives or towards friends or whatever, or our bosses in business or whatever. And that sometimes when bad things happen to us, we think, "Oh man, it's because I did this and that." But ultimately, God can turn a bad situation, even your evil works, into a positive situation. And as long as it leads you to Him and to heaven and to leading other people to Christ, that is a good thing that is happening to you and not evil. God is not so much concerned with our comfort as He is with our salvation. So just remember that in the future, when you're going through hard times, that God will use it for His good. Well, thank you for listening this evening. Again, if you want to contact me, you can look at my website, www.malonegreg.com, and all my contact information is on there. Remember, the power of life and death is in the tongue. Choose life.